Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be discussing the lovely Taurus Ascendants. So before we begin, let's introduce this by saying that we are using the Vedic astronomical measurements, part of the Indian system of astrology, which is distinct and different from the Western tropical perspective of astrology. Many people who are Taurus ascendants in tropical astrology are actually going to be Aries ascendants in Vedic astrology due to the 24-degree difference in calculation of the star positions. Whereas many individuals who are Gemini ascendants in tropical astrology will in fact be Vedic Taurus ascendants. So also something to keep in mind is that this is a fundamental reading for Taurus ascendants, which means that various placements and aspects and things of that nature can affect the energy and the outcome of some of these characteristics and traits, depending on the specifics of those factors. But generally speaking, this is the foundation for this ascendant position. So with that said, let's go ahead and get right into the reading. So Taurus ascendants are lovely, desirable, fertile, stable, comfortable individuals. You'll find that particularly the women, but definitely people in general who have Taurus ascendant energy are desired romantically often by other individuals. This is because their first house is ruled by Venus, so Libra ascendants can experience this as well. Though with Taurus ascendants, I think that one of the differences is that really the beauty and the fertility and that energy is really deeply rooted in the body. Whereas with the Libra ascendants, it's a lot like their kind of divine beauty, goddess energy is expressed a lot through their social interactions. It's sort of like how they make people feel socially and communicatively. There's a way that they handle their relationships, which makes a person feel that Venusian energy. Whereas with the Taurus ascendant, it's like they kind of are the physical embodiment of Venusian energy itself. So you can often see them being, very curvaceous, or, just even in the case of some of, like I've seen a few like lean Taurus ascendants even, but even in those cases, they just have this fertility about them, where if you're a guy and you're like looking at a Taurus ascendant woman, you're like, I want to have babies with that woman. It's a very, very strong kind of present sort of feeling. Because the Taurus energy is very much like a fertile garden. It's in many ways like the height of prosperity. It's the exaltation point of the moon. It just feels really, really good. So these are very sensual people, romantic people. They love to feel good with their clothing. They love to look beautiful and look good. They love to eat great food. They're usually, good cooks as well. They can be fantastic, even with like minimal ingredients. Sometimes they can just make it. For some reason, it tastes better when they make it. They make food very, very well. These people are just masterfully adept at drawing out sensual pleasures in human experience for themselves and with the people that they're with. So particularly in Rohini Nakshatra, the height of romantic desirability that other people can have for them is extremely high. Scorpio is also in their 7th house, so you can find partners who kind of become obsessed with these individuals and how beautiful they are, and they're just like, I want to marry you, like wife material kind of energy, or husband material kind of energy. It's in the case of a male Taurus ascendant. They really make a person feel like the Taurus ascendant person is stable. I think when you're looking for wives and for husbands, you're also looking for commitment. You're looking for people like who are going to kind of fulfill this role over an extended period of time consistently. It's a sort of long-term thing. So in this case, Taurus ascendant really excels at having that energy. Like they just feel like they're automatically wife or husband material. Somehow they carry this energy of being able to fulfill that role. And like I said, in Rohini Nakshatra, the beauty level can reach its height, like regardless of even how a person's physical appearance is, whether those are characteristics physically. Even say a person who has the Rohini ascendant or Taurus ascendant, even in general, but especially in Rohini, say their characteristics are beautiful, but maybe not a person specific type. That person who maybe normally wouldn't be attracted to that specific type will still be extremely attracted to the Taurus ascendant person, oftentimes, because there's a magnetism, there's an energy that makes them feel like they are truly a treasure. It's like dating a goddess. It's truly a wonderful, magnificent thing. The Taurus ascendants, they have Gemini in the second house. So you'll often find that the families that they're born into can be quite communicative. They generally have friendly, good relationships with their family members, although sometimes their relationships can be a little shallow, right? So it's not to say that the Taurus ascendant has a shallow view per se of their family members, but sometimes it can be kind of like they're born into a family where everyone's friendly with each other, they talk with each other, but maybe they don't talk about their deepest feelings. Maybe they don't talk about like their deepest things that are affecting them or influencing them, or that they have on their minds or on their hearts. So sometimes Gemini has this sort of surface level energy, but also the Taurus ascendant's family members will often be intelligent, well adaptable. They can sometimes just be like well connected, funny to be around. Very active as well. You could see them generally financially well off as well, for the most part. At the very least, not usually, like rarely do I think Taurus ascendants get born into like truly poor households. They usually have their needs met. So those are all good quality things. Also, Taurus ascendants value communication and having fun, like having a good rapport is important. When it comes to their assets, their wealth assets, it can be beneficial for a Taurus ascendant to store their assets in multiple ways. So say, for example, there are some individuals who will only put money in a savings account. There are other individuals who will only put money into stocks and bonds. It's very good for Taurus ascendants to diversify their assets. So they have some money in stocks and bonds. They have some money in gold, which is in their safe. They have some money in their savings account. They have some money in other fixed assets, right? So they kind of diversify, multiply their stored wealth. And this will help that stored wealth to grow and accumulate. If they try to put all of their stored wealth in one place, it may not flourish as much as it otherwise would. So the third house for a Taurus ascendant is Cancer, which means that for a Taurus ascendant to feel comfortable hanging out with friends, talking to people in a casual manner, they really have to feel comfortable, almost like these people are a family member. Like they're not really the type to just go out and hang out at a club or at a bar and just chill. It's not to say that they'll never do those things, but that's generally not their inclination, especially in a long-term consistent sense. They want to feel safe when they're hanging out with people. They want to feel a close, intimate, familiar, sentimental connection with the people who they hang out and talk with. So they can spend a lot of time with family as a result of this, whether it's their kind of chosen family, their family that they've made, like with their spouse and their children, or with their birth family, depending on their relationship with the birth family, which of course depends on a lot of factors. But always, if a Taurus ascendant is uncomfortable, if they're a bunch of strangers and they don't feel like they could be vulnerable or make an intimate connection with these people they're hanging out with at the bar, they'll just go, right? They have such a sense of their own intrinsic value and their own kind of like purity, that they're very likely to only choose to connect with people who they feel like they can make an intimate connection with, who there's something emotional and valuable and deep about that type of connection. Taurus ascendants can have a deep sentimental connection also with their younger siblings in particular. They can kind of be like a mother to their younger siblings. There can be a very nurturing relationship between them. So that's very, very lovely. They might be making them food. They might be making their younger siblings feel safe. Generally, so long as the moon is well placed, you're going to see a fairly decent relationship with the younger siblings. Although the one thing that is to be noted about this placement is that Venus and Moon sometimes, even though they're both very feminine planets, and I think that in many ways they do seem to get along well, in my opinion. Moon is exalted in Taurus, and I like to think that Venus does well in Cancer and things of that nature. The one thing is that Venus is a kind of love that it's like I want pleasure, right? It's like a little bit, I don't want to say selfish, but it is kind of self-focused to some extent. It's also about other people, but Moon is more completely giving. Think about like a mother's love, right? So like if you have a wife also wants to receive love when she's in a romantic union. So she wants to give love and receive love. A mother will just is selfless, will just give love, right? So sometimes, if the Taurus ascendant's own needs and desires are and things that make them comfortable and feel good are at odds with the people they're hanging out with, or their family, or their younger siblings, or whatever it is, they may take a step back to nourish themselves first, and then they kind of fill those people up with an overflowing cup. Like when they're filled up and they feel good and they feel stable and they've got everything, then they will kind of overflow and take care of others. Another thing is that when it comes to learning skills and putting effort into things, Taurus ascendants like to take their sweet time, and they like to do it in an environment where they're comfortable. They don't want to have to be trying to learn a skill in like a really intense environment where they're like, like a military kind of environment, or where they're under a lot of pressure. They're going to want to feel like they're at home, they're comfortable when they're learning their skill. Like if they're going to learn to do anything, it's better that they're able to do it at their own pace in their comfort zone, where they feel like nested up and like there's no pressure. So the fourth house for a Taurus ascendant is Leo. So the pride for a Taurus ascendant is in the home. When they have their own home, when the walls that they live within, or the place that their territory they call their home, is a great source of strength for them, a great source of pride. They will be the queen or the king of that place. They really shine when they have land, when they have a home, a house, something they can be proud of. They'll want it to look good, to look regal. So they're like, this is my house. And everyone's like, wow, look at how amazing this place you live in is, so gorgeous. You must truly be a divine goddess to live in such a wonderful royal place. She's like, yes, I am. So very, very important to have the home looking nice, and likely, the person who has a Taurus ascendant will kind of want things to be in a certain way. They may have specific ways they want things arranged or want things to look. They'll have a standard for sure about how they want their home to be. They're not going to let their home look messy and then other people come over and see that messy house, because then they'll feel like it's a really deep reflection on their internal value and on their kind of royal regal nature. They won't have it. So they'll want that place to look nice. They'll want that place to be a place where they can take pride in, where people come over and they're just like, wow. That's very important. The relationship with the mother for a Taurus ascendant is usually one that is very significant. So, there can be past life experiences with the mother. There can be like mother really having a very big influence on shaping this individual. They can take a lot of pride in their mother. There can even sometimes be sort of ego battles with the mother, depending on the placements. Like the mother may even try to challenge the child for authority or for a very status position or something like that. But the relationship with the mother is going to be significant, and it's going to definitely have a very big impact on how this native feels about themselves. about the pride that they're able to take in life is very deeply connected with the mother. So there's also a strong theme of lineage here with the matriarchal line. So in a lot of ways, like if you think of like royal families, how they often passed down sort of statuses or significant roles or energies through the male line, like father to son, kings, princes, things like that. Here you see this kind of heritage, this passing down of some type of regal baton in the matriarchal line, like it's a royal family. All right, so you can actually have Taurus ascendants being born into families that have some type of magical lineage or have some type of regal royal history, even if they don't consciously know it. It might be that that mother's line used to be royalty somewhere or something really important, and she can also see that whoever the native Taurus ascendant native is can gain special abilities, powers, and gifts, like spiritual gifts, talents, divine insights through the mother's lineage. So here in the 5th house, we have Virgo. So when Taurus ascendants date, they can be quite shy, quite reserved, quite rational and logical and responsible, right? So, when they're not necessarily the type to just go out and get super swept off their feet immediately, like they may, but they'll also still handle it responsibly. Like, okay, like I really love this person. I think they're amazing. I want to get swept off my feet immediately, but I'm also going to make sure that this, and this thing is in order. And I'm going to make sure that they check this box and then do this thing and make sure everything's in its proper alignment. They're pretty responsible in that way. When they go out on dates, if they're, they will be analyzing their partners to make sure that they kind of measure up to some type of value system, to make sure that their partners are really worthy of them. There are other ascendants, they get the stars in their eyes and they're immediately their head over heels with that person. Doesn't matter anything else. They're just full on. That's it. Taurus ascendants, they're a little more reserved, a little more analytical, right? They're like, okay, I love this person. I think they're amazing, but do they have the qualities I'm looking for? Let me think about this. Let me check. Okay, I got this. Excellent. So Taurus ascendants, they're one of the people that, for the most part, like if you're a parent of a Taurus ascendant, you can more or less be comfortable knowing that they're going to behave generally more responsibly than the average teenager or young person in the dating scene. There's a certain degree of responsibility about them. Gorgeous as they are, if they're like at a school dance or something like that, they might still be the wallflower. They might still be hiding over there like, oh, I'm shy. You got to come over here and invite me to dance. They're like, oh, you invited me. Oh, okay. They could be the most beautiful person in the room. They might even know they're the most beautiful person in the room, but they'll still act like that wallflower, shy, reserved person. And there's a very charming kind of innocent youthfulness to that. That's really quite lovely. When it comes to their children, Taurus ascendants will be generally very structured with the children. They'll have rules. They got to follow the rules. I'd be like, okay, you got to brush your teeth at this time, got to go to bed at this time. And if the kids start to trespass the rules, it can really stress them out. It's just like, it's too much. So it's very, very important that I think getting support with the children is very good for a Taurus ascendant in general. There's the spouse, and the spouse kind of knows, okay, like mom or dad said, to do this thing, they're going to get stressed out if you don't do the thing. I'll make sure you do the thing. All right. They kind of take on that responsibility for the Taurus ascendant to some extent, because they provide a lot of the structure. They'll make sure the kids know you got to do this thing at this time. You got to take your vitamins. You got to brush your teeth. You've got to get to school on time. All that stuff. They'll bring that energy to the table, but they'll also want support executing it. Otherwise, they can start to feel stressed out. So Libra is here in the 6th house. for a Taurus Ascendant. And so this, again, kind of supports that they really need support when it comes to carrying out like a lot of their daily tasks, their obstacles. Like when a Taurus Ascendant comes up against an obstacle, they really want to call in help to help them deal with it. Right? They're not really the type to just plow through and conquer any obstacle and be like, yeah, I got this. Like a Scorpio Ascendant be like, yes, challenges, brah. They'll just run straight towards it like, I'm excited now, ha ha ha. Taurus Ascendants are like, oh, I was coasting so gracefully through the earth plane. Now I have come up against an obstacle. I would like assistance, please. So they really do well when they're supported by their spouse when it comes to 6th house matters. So they don't like to have enemies. And with Libra Ascendant also, or not Libra Ascendant, but Libra in the 6th house also, they'll tend to not have that many enemies. Like most times, people will just they're very diplomatic. That diplomatic, friendly energy, Libra, is in the house of enemies. So most of the times, the enemies won't perceive them as a threat, or they'll just like people that could have been enemies to other people will just like them instead. You know, like, oh, I won't fight that person. No problem. So they generally are well liked by everyone. And they're not the type to get people specifically kind of after them, that sort of thing. And when it comes to their work, they do really well working in tandem with people. So like if they can kind of like inspire their partner to do certain tasks, you know, they can really, really benefit from that. That's not to say that they can't do anything, of course, like by themselves. Of course, Taurus Ascendants, they're fixed earth. They're very capable. But a lot of that capability comes out almost like through the companionship and through being able to nurture and nourish a partner. Then those goals can kind of be fulfilled. Also, something that's important to keep in mind is that their relationships affect their health to a pretty significant degree. Because, you know, you have their chart ruler being Venus, you have their 6th house, the house of health, the house of illnesses, also having Libra in it, which is ruled by Venus, first 6th house connection there. So, you know, their own personal state affects their health. You know, like how they're handling their first house energies, you know, whether they're feeling like they're prosperous or they're feeling like they're really being themselves and authentic, and they're feeling pleasure and things in life, like they have to have enough wealth, enough food to feel good. Like if they don't have the comforts and things like that, their health can start to suffer. And also if their relationships aren't going well and they're stressed in their relationships, it can really affect them and make their whole system go haywire. So they've really got to have very kind of like conscious partners that treat them well and have all those things, relationships go smoothly. And a lot, it's like putting oil, you know, in the engine, everything just kind of runs well if that's going on. So this brings us to their 7th house, which is Scorpio. So it's very, very fascinating that Scorpio and Taurus are on the same axis for many reasons. I find the axis, the sign axes to be absolutely fascinating fields of study. And Taurus Ascendants are so stable, so reliable, loyal. You know, they're these fertile goddesses. And they feel drawn towards very intense, passionate, mysterious, sometimes chaotic, traumatized partners. So it's kind of like, imagine the beautiful goddess who's walking through a field and she finds like a wounded warrior who, you know, has been battling dark forces. You know, it's just like he's got all this baggage and stuff like that, but he needs to kind of like be nursed back to health. The goddess will probably fall in love with that person. All right. So it has a lot of, if you study Greek mythology, if you study the legend of like Persephone and Hades, there's a lot of symbology that kind of corresponds to the Scorpio-Taurus dynamic here. So, you know, they actually want a partner. Well, first of all, Taurus Ascendants, they have a very strong, deep desire for partnership. for deep, passionate, intimate connection. They're very, very, very romantic. Although, because of their fifth house Virgo and other things, like you might not know that about them because they are so buttoned up properly and they behave so well and they're not going around like, I need all the time. They feel like they have everything that they need. That's what it seems like. But deep down, they yearn for passion. They yearn for connection. They yearn to be transformed through loving connection. It's almost like they want to connect with someone who's so passionate, who's so deep, who's so transformative that it can kind of like burn and transform and melt them away into the bliss of ecstatic love. They want it deep, deep, deep connection. And so, you know, choosing partners is something that Taurus ascendants have to do very wisely, because they can be drawn towards partners, you know, where people are looking at them as like, how is this wonderful, completely stable, you know, prosperous person pairing up with this chaotic outcast type person? And you're just like, whoa, how is this partnership happening? Right? You can see those kinds of dynamics. That could be good and that could be bad. Right? So sometimes, you know, it's very important, especially depending on like where Mars is, where other certain planets are. Like you have to see where Venus is and stuff, Jupiter for the husband, to kind of get an image of what their attraction point is in terms of romance. But always it'll be something intense. Always it'll be something that is kind of deeper and mysterious than what they've known before. You know, really, the partners that they seek also kind of like bring them into deeper new worlds. You know, it's like the people can be very, very deep psychologically and just reveal new things about reality to them. And they're just like, wow, you know, just completely being transformed by their relationships with these scorpionic individuals. So, and then also they can attract partners who they have that kind of a Hades archetype type of deep, passionate need for a partner as well. So where these people are like, you know, they spot the Taurus ascendant person and then they bind to them on a very powerful level. So they can find people like they have obsessed relationships, one direction or both directions towards each other. There can be a lot of obsession going on there. So depending on what this Taurus ascendant person has stored, like karmically, and what their specific energetic relationship is with scorpionic energy, that can be like a profound, world level transforming, intimate relationship full of deep, deep passion and intimacy and connection. Or it can be a very chaotic, karmic types of relationships. You know, so very, very important that a lot of consciousness is brought to bear on the nature of the partners whom they choose. But for one thing you can be sure of is that it will always be interesting. So here in the 8th house, they have Sagittarius. Now this is a very powerful placement as well. 8th house has to do with our occult knowledge, our hidden things that we hide, our hidden energies, hidden talents to some extent. You know, how we relate to like very deep, passionate, intimate things. And here we have Sagittarius. So firstly, this gives Taurus ascendants the ability to grasp occultism. You know, this is one of those pair-ups that gives someone that ability. When you see like these kind of strong Jupiterian 8th house overlays and, you know, Scorpio kind of stuff going on, you know, when you get the higher mind connecting with the occult knowledge in this way, the person has the ability to grasp those things. So they'll have more of an interest for occultism generally than even like deep kinds of spirituality. Now, of course, the Navamsha chart matters, like other placements matters, like depending on where Jupiter is, like they can still have a spiritual affinity. We'll get to the 9th house in a minute, which is why I'm saying that. But the 8th house definitely means that they can almost develop their belief system to some extent, pertaining to like these hidden forces. So like what they experience, for example, with their deep scorpionic partners can have a big influence on their belief system and transform their perspective of life, can deepen their wisdom, and they can have a sort of dark wisdom as well, you know. Like what I mean by dark wisdom is a wisdom of the hidden things, because Sagittarius is a fire sign. So, and to some extent, it brings the light into the darkness. So they can bring their higher mind energies into hidden waters and just understand things that are going on there if other placements support it. So a really cool thing about this placement is that when they go through traumatic events, they generally stay quite positive. It's not easy to get a Taurus Ascendant down. It's not easy to shake their faith. Taurus Ascendants have a deep, almost intrinsic faith about their well-being, about the safety of the universe. And that faith, that connection, can help to shield them during dark times, turbulent times, or danger. You can find that, say something's about to go down and nobody else knows what's going on. The Taurus Ascendant might just get an intuition and then leave that area right when something was about to happen. And then they could get away completely scot-free. Because that Jupiterian energy in the 8th house is like a divine protection. It keeps them safe, keeps them well guided. So they tend to make less mistakes in general, I think, than a lot of other ascendant positions, due to, I think, Virgo being in the 5th house, the stability of being Taurus being in the 1st house, the Jupiterian energy safeguarding them from 8th house events. It can be very, very helpful. But then I think another element to it too is while this provides a divine protection, I think it also means that there's a certain type of harsh realism that they have, because also if you have Sagittarius in the 9th house or in the 1st house, the person's going to be bubbly like a lot of the time. They're very bubbly, right? They don't really dwell on dark things. But because Sagittarius here is in the 8th house, it's almost like there's a constant churning of deep hidden things going on somewhere in their mind. And so they might not be the bubbliest person. Not to say that they're depressed either, because they're going to be good, but there's a seriousness to them, but that Sagittarius energy that might not be there with other Sagittarius positions. And I think another thing about this placement is that the deep, intimate experiences that they have really help them to connect with the divine. I think that's a big part of their 7th house scorpionic energy as well. Scorpio is the natural sign that belongs in the 8th house. So in many ways, like, they can connect to God through sexual experiences, like through divine unions, through these deep 8th house things, like these bonded and intimate experiences, like even discussing like a traumatic experiences with someone they love can kind of open their mind to divine principles. So moving on to their 9th house, this is a bit of a challenging position. Definitely a challenging position for a Taurus Ascendant. Capricorn here is in the sign of Sagittarius, in the house of Sagittarius, in the house of Jupiter. And Capricorn is obviously where Jupiter is debilitated. So to easily find the proper spiritual guidance can sometimes be a challenge for Taurus Ascendants. That's sometimes why they look for it in these deep, dark places, because it's not maybe necessarily obvious to them. See, somebody has, great placements in their 9th house. They could just look somewhere and they're like, oh, there's the divine knowledge. Oh, I found it in this text. Oh, I found it outside when I was gazing at the sunrise. Here's the divine knowledge. I just downloaded it. But see, here, a lot of times their higher wisdom can be a bit debilitated. It can be a struggle. It can be delayed, their knowledge. And so it's a little bit like a desert, right? It's just like, okay, there's this desert of divine knowledge. So where do I look for it? And they can look for it in these deep, dark, intense places. They can look for it in these deep, mysterious figures, these lovers who they want to transform through, because they might not know where else to find it. But once that gets rolling, they can obviously advance very quickly, especially if they have placements in their chart which support the accumulation of divine wisdom and spiritual energies. But you can often find that Taurus Ascendants can institutionalize their spiritual knowledge to some extent, to some degree. It could be that they just become very rigid in what their belief system is. It's kind of like the 10 Commandments that they're written down. These are the belief systems, and they just won't change that. Even if they're presented with new spiritual evidence, they can be very stubborn when it comes to adapting to new spiritual information and to growing spiritually. It could take them a long time. They can be presented with the most brilliant, insightful, wise insight about spiritual truths. And whereas it might take another ascendant a second to grasp it, it might take them years to go through and process that download. Because Capricorn, Saturn is delaying that. And there's also no guarantee that they will download that properly. So making sure that they are not being misguided or misled or misunderstanding certain spiritual truths is like a challenge for Taurus ascendants. It's very easy to kind of just get a very kind of crunched perspective of it. It's just like, boom, here it is. It's like there's a book's worth of knowledge and they read like a page and they're just like, there, I got it. That's as far as I've been able to get with it. So that's a very, very challenging position for a Taurus ascendant. So it's very important to see where the position of Jupiter is, where, what's happening with Pisces, and what's going on in their Navamsha chart, which is ultimately going to play the biggest factor, I think, in determining how spiritual they'll ultimately be able to become. If their Navamsha has very strong indicators of spirituality, they can certainly rise up out of that. If their Jupiter is well placed in D1 and they've got a great spiritual Navamsha, no afflictions to Jupiter, their 9th house looks great, then it'll just take them a little longer, maybe, but they'll get it. But another thing about this is that they can very firmly adhere to a belief system. So if they are born into a certain religion, or they choose a certain religion, they choose a certain code of living, whatever that is for them, they can adhere to that like it's their job. They can adhere to that with a professional level of seriousness. They'll take it very, very seriously. So that's why it's so important to make sure that they get that wisdom and belief system correct, which is the challenging part, because they can solidify it so hard and they're like, this is how it is. I am going to stick with this. You can't tell me different. Right? So keep that in mind. So Taurus ascendants have Aquarius in the 10th house, which is also ruled by Saturn. And obviously that's a good position because Saturn naturally rules the 10th house, which is Capricorn's natural house. And, Aquarius is Saturn's Multricone sign. So here, the reputation for a Taurus ascendant is generally, again, well-liked, although there can sometimes still be a bit of a difficulty to approach. That's part of the harshness of Saturn being a malefic. Their reputation might be, well, first of all, they'll seem very well-connected. They'll seem very well-liked. It'll seem like society resonates with them in a powerful way. Like they can be well represented. So then when it comes to someone trying to approach a Taurus ascendant and get to know them, if they're just knowing them by their 10th house reputation, it can be like, wow, like this person's so well connected and so well liked and so woven into society. Am I even worthy of being able to approach this person? There can be that harshness. There can be that difficulty in doing it because it's a little bit daunting. But then another thing that comes with this is that, their career tends to be interconnected with a sort of humanitarian mission. Right? That's, I think, one of the ways in which their career progresses best. So when there's some really benevolent reason why they have a job, like say they're working with the ecosystem, say they're working with animals, they're working with community work, they're an activist, they're working with a charity, things that have a sort of purpose that's going to benefit society, their career can flourish and thrive. There's a bit of a selfless service energy that goes into the success of a Taurus ascendant's career. They have to have some type of higher principle, some reason that's going to benefit everybody to have their career really take off. And when they do, they can become quite well known, quite well connected. They can find themselves in an organization, in some type of group doing very well. So they have Pisces in the 11th house, right? This is an intriguing one. You know, here, despite being able to kind of be a big part of this, you know, some type of movement, some type of activist group, you know, some type of benevolent purpose mission with a group of people, they can sometimes be quite very actually disconnected and disinterested to some extent in the actual group itself. You know, like they actually almost would rather be isolated from big groups rather than have a lot of fun and just like, yeah, we're gonna go and be in this organization, yay. It's more like, I'm doing this for spiritual reasons. For spiritual reasons, I'm going to participate in this group. If there's not a spiritual reason why they're gonna connect with a certain type of network circle, they probably won't. They'd probably rather be at home or isolated somewhere. So another thing that this can do is it can give Taurus ascendants a network circle of very kind of spiritual, intuitive people. Like when they do actually form kind of like a group of friends who they belong to, they'll tend to be united by some type of spiritual principles, or just very meditative or reflective in some way. They'll always also be like very little conflict. They're not really interested in competition in their network groups. They're not really interested in struggles or arguments or anything like that. They just want things to flow effortlessly. So that brings us to Aries and their 12th house. So here, you know, when they start traveling to foreign lands, when they go into an altered state of consciousness, whether it's a drum circle, whether it's a substance like even alcohol, but it could be, um, you know, psilocybin, ayahuasca, their fire comes out. So all the prudence that they have, like if you're trying to date a Taurus ascendant, you know, they're very prudent and, you know, they're buttoned up and they behave very well and they don't want to, you know, stay out too late on the first date or something like that. If they're drunk, they can act completely differently. They can just be like, yeah, no, boom, and just be very, very direct, very passionate, very sexual, very aggressive. If they get mad, it's like a lot of the boundaries and the barriers kind of will drop to some extent. And they're just like, normally they might have behaved very well if someone was upsetting them, but if they're drunk, they might just punch the person. They might just like, no, just yell and be very direct about it. So, you know, really their Aries energy comes out a lot when their 12th house is activated. So another thing about, you know, just having Aries here in the 12th is that like getting to know like themselves and their own drive and their own desires can sometimes be a bit of a challenge, because they have a lot of things that they uphold. You know, they want to make sure that they are always kind of carrying themselves and being in a certain way, so that, you know, like their own aggressive ability to kind of be contrary, to be, you know, uh, decisive and just to like be independent and stuff like that, like just go out there and pave your own way. That part of themselves they kind of have to put more effort into connecting to, or, you know, like I said, go into these things, these states that activate the 12th house in order to really find. And so if they were there to take, you know, say like go on a psilocybin journey, ayahuasca journey, something like that, you know, they can come into a lot of personal power very quickly. They can suddenly become very confident and they're like, oh yeah, no, I know what I'm doing. I may have been confused 5 seconds ago, but now I know exactly what I'm doing. You know, they can actually become very calm inside their warrior energy when these things activate. Like if they're very kind of demure at home in their homeland and then they start traveling abroad, they're just like, oh yeah, like I run this stuff. You know what I mean? Like I know exactly what I'm doing. Boom, I'm gonna do this. They're confident. They feel independent. They're like, I can travel by myself, no problem. I can go and do all this stuff, right? So that's a very, very cool energy to have. So I hope you enjoyed this dialogue and exploration of the wonderful energy of Taurus ascendants. I really like this ascendant. I think they're really lovely people. Um, so if you have any comments that you'd like to post below, please do. Any uh, questions that you would like to ask about Taurus ascendants, or any points that you would like to bring up if you're a Taurus ascendant or know them, that we didn't talk about in the video, please go ahead and post them below. And yeah, thanks so much for watching.